I'm Lisa Petrides, and I'm going to start off. I'm going to actually time myself here. So we're going to speak for 10 minutes each. We have just an hour before lunch, so we'll have very little time for questions, but hopefully that's what we can use our lunchtime for. So our session is about shifting from subject-centered to student-centered education. And I wanted to take a moment just to talk about how we know that every student deserves a highly effective, engaging, and equitable education. And from the session before, I would add everything in there that they said too. Critical thinking, empathetic, those are the things that we really need to reach their full potential. And I want to talk a little bit about my work in open educational resources, but I want to just set up my talk is going to sort of set up the panel, the rest of the speakers, as well as tell you a little bit more about my work. So as we move from this subject-centered to a student-centered mode of education, I think, again, we've already heard so much of this in the last 2 days, but we're moving from subject-based to interdisciplinary, standardized teaching to competency-based learning, and I'll give just a couple of quick examples about each of these. One size fits all to personalized learning, and proprietary curriculum to open educational resources. You heard this morning somebody talk from Austria about that example too. So competency-based education is probably the best living example of this is what we see in Finland today. But this is something that's really growing in the United States, but in other countries as well, where we're really focusing on what is the outcome, and then how you teach to get to that outcome is personalized and adaptive. It's not prescriptive. That's the concept between competency-based education. In terms of examples of personalized learning, we talk about the adaptability of resources, empowering students, and keeping them engaged. I'll talk a little bit more about each of these, and I'm hoping our slide will be available afterwards too, after the meeting. I don't know if anybody has confirmed that, but that would be a great way to be able to share with the limited time that we have. I want to talk about open educational resources because I think this is more than just a thing. It's really an approach, and in some ways, during the last panel, I kept thinking, how do we take what we learned from there and how do we develop it into curriculum? Because I'm really thinking about the pragmatic level and what that could look like. And so for those of you who don't know, open educational resources, they're really about teaching and learning resources that are free and available to anyone, and they're published in a way that allows their distribution, it allows their adaptation, it allows the personalization. So it isn't about, we're trying to move away from this very prescriptive textbook model of education. And if we think about, again, what we just saw in the last panel, these are many ideas that we don't find in traditional textbooks. And for those of you who were here the first night of the event, in my talk there, I talked about how just in the United States alone, and I wish I had some international numbers, we'll get those soon, but just in the United States alone, from the K-12 education, primary and secondary, that's an $8 billion a year market. That's not just a one-time investment, that's every single year. And if we multiplied it by every country of people who are here, we can see that there's actually not a scarcity of resources, there's an abundance of resources that could be reallocated in this way to think about what OER really affords. So specifically, and I'll give a couple of examples of this as well, but OER really creates the use of OER, not just the OER itself, but it creates a shift in teaching practice and with an opportunities to meet instructional goals by the vetting and curating and the modifying material approaches to students, both their personalized student needs and their interests. But even more important than that is the fact that if I'm a teacher and I'm modifying curriculum to my students, if I share that back into the commons, into the public good, then other people can build on that. So I'm a big recycler at home, and so this idea of how you take or reuse what you have and pass it on for others to personalize, whether it's about new exercises or a language translation, whatever it is, how do we then share that back? There's more than enough educators around the world who are doing incredible work in their classrooms. We don't need to, it's not a big expense to have to build all of this curriculum. We can take what we have and then we can adapt it and build on it that way. For those of you who don't know much about open educational resources, this has been around for a while. UNESCO actually defined the term OER back in 2002 in Cape Town. Was an open education declaration that encouraged a set of strategies around building awareness of OER. This was in 2007, so this is 12 years ago. In 2014, there was a Paris OER declaration that provided a series of recommendations to educational stakeholders, and it really encouraged governments, so at the top level, to really create policies around this. Up till then, so much of the emphasis was a very bottom-up approach. And what we're seeing now, and as recently as 2017, when the Second World OER Congress was in Slovenia, that was sponsored by UNESCO, and it was about OER for inclusive and equitable quality education. And there were heads of ministries of education and a lot of other state leads that were really looking at this and saying this is an imperative. It's been very much tied to the Sustainable Development Goal number 4. For those of you who have memorized all 17, this is number 4. And so there really is an emphasis on this now in a way worldwide that there hasn't been before. Just briefly, if we think about how OER supports student-centered learning, it is about equitable access. It's about adaptability. It's about collaborative opportunities, as I mentioned, for educators to create, evaluate, share relevant and engaging learning experiences. And it's also about building and scaling the systems around continuous improvement and innovation. My organization has built an open educational resource library. It's like a public digital library. It's called OER Commons. I just put this out here as an example. There's many good libraries around the world. We also help other people build their libraries for other states, organizations, and for ministries of education. And in fact, the gentleman from Austria this morning told you about one that was in Austria. So this is just one example. Just an example, we've done a lot of research also in this field of OER, and this was a project that we worked with librarians. We worked with about 100 librarians and asked them how they create and curate content for their teachers, and this was both at the primary, secondary, as well as the higher ed level. And you can see it really is a process that goes from collaboratively identifying the curriculum needs. Again, if we picked off where the last session left off and thought, what are those curriculum needs for actually teaching mindfulness and empathy and compassion? The second stage was, and this was their process that they used, agreeing on a curriculum framework and curation goal. So this is taking that work and putting it into action. Being able to search and evaluate it for use, building the content and then aligning it to whatever kind of standards were important, in that context. So that might be curriculum standards, it might be quality standards, it might be compassion standards. The whole SEL movement is also looking at how to define some standards around social emotional learning, and can we create content that's aligned to those standards, so when you want to use this materials in a classroom, you can say, I know that these are part of that process. And then, of course, this is very much of a design thinking process. So you share the content, you pilot it, you refine it, and you start all over again. So this continuous feedback loop is a really important part, and it's been almost non-existent in education in terms of curriculum. I know many schools in the US and also around the world are using textbooks that are 20 plus years old. That's some pretty static curriculum over time. It's also been exciting to watch some of this OER policy be created at the government level. The Commonwealth of Learning reported that 55% of the countries had been increasing their support for OER policy. Like I mentioned, the UNESCO Sustainability Development Goal is a very strong initiative in the education division of UNESCO. And in the US, under a prior administration, there was an initiative called Go Open, in which we already have commitments from 20 states and 120 districts to use OER. Research on OER has shown us that for educators who are using OER, it increased the collaboration around curriculum and instruction, and also had the educators themselves an increase in their own reflective practice. So almost a reprofessionalization of their work. Instead of being told, here's what you teach on Thursday, here's what you test on Friday, what does it mean to actually put the concept of curriculum back into those experts who really understand their classrooms and their classroom needs better than anybody? For learners, we've looked at how the use of OER has increased student interest in their subject, satisfaction with the learning experience. Not surprisingly, when you see this, we often have students, both at the K-12 and the higher ed level, working with faculty to create new curriculum. So maybe the faculty member will first present it that year, and by the end of that semester, students have themselves recommended how to improve the curriculum. So this is, again, very student-centered. And not to mention that OER really supports students as self-directed learners as well, because this kind of content is available. There's a big move towards something with commercial publishers around digital, which is maybe you get your digital content on some tablet, but it's only available for that amount of time of the semester, and then it's gone. So they say that this is free, freely available because it's on the tablet that you've already bought for the student. But in fact, that really doesn't have the spirit of open, because it doesn't allow you to take that, to remix it, to distribute it, not to mention to have it over time. So this is me. Email me. I don't know if many people here are on Twitter. I've tried to find some of you there already. But what I want to do next is all of the panelists beforehand actually provided a 1 or 2 pager about their talk today. And we took that, all the text from that, and we put it in a word cloud, and here's what you get. So this is kind of a preview of what you're about to hear from the other 4 speakers. You can see that, personalized skills, capacity, experience, knowledge, independent, student-centered. These are all sort of make up kind of the body of what you're about to hear. I just want to leave you with some questions to be thinking about, both when you're listening to this next set of panelists, but also just sort of in general as a kind of a framing for the conference here. And again, many of these things have been said already in the last 2 days, but, learning for what purpose, right? Is it a job? Is it critical thinking? Is it collaboration and communication? What changes need to be made to make materials better, to reflect the communities that you serve? Because what communities need in, Cape Town, South Africa are going to probably be different than what they need in Paris. So there's a lot of reasons for the personalization of content. We hear this over and over again, how you make education relevant for today's learners, whether they're in formal or informal systems of education. And then I think a really big question that we have to be looking at is not only sort of how do we get the curriculum relevant to the global challenges that we face today, but why is education still so inaccessible to many? And what could we be doing to actually change that? So thank you. And I stayed within my 10 minutes, just so you know. And I would like to first introduce Vani Sentil, and I'm not going to spend any time introducing people. They can say something about themselves as they want, but again, for the essence of time, we'll speed along here.
My name is Vani Senthil. I work as a researcher in Mother Service Society India, and I also work at a school run by the Research Institute. The primary driver for education is the interest of the student and not the importance of the subject. A rigid curriculum is focused on training the students with abstract knowledge and technical skills. This system does not consider the needs and the interest of the person and leaves him unmotivated. An unmotivated child is not very participative and it's nearly impossible to educate them. Education is the collective wisdom gained from centuries of experience communicated to the future generations. But recently, due to technological and social evolutions, there is an incremental development of educational content and pedagogy. Also, this overload of information is available at our fingertips. It is high time now for us to realize that transfer of information is not the objective of education. Education must develop the person, his capacities, character, and personality so that he is equipped with life skills to reach his highest efficiency. We need a shift from imparting mere information to nurture thinking in the person. So we need to find out what are the nature of thinking and the nature of mind to understand this process. People construct knowledge from their experience. They learn something new by building on what they already know. All knowledge is self-referential. It is a continuous process of experience, reflection, and conceptualization. Personal relevance increases the student's motivation to learn, engage in what is being taught, and in retention and also in recall. We need a shift from a standardized mass education that tries to fit a person into a profile of profession to a personalized and customized education that meets the aspiration of the person. Each student learns differently. We must present the subject according to the learning capacities of the student. Presenting the content in pluralistic ways as visuals, audio, and hands-on experience is important to engage students with different learning faculties. Students have agency over learning when they are given a choice. This is very much achieved by blended learning strategy, which has exponentially increased the capacity of teachers to deliver individualized instruction for each and every student. Blended learning is a model that combines online and face-to-face learning spaces. The online component is self-directed inquiry. The face-to-face interactions satisfy the need of the student for expert guidance, psychological and moral support from the teachers. Technology has provided unlimited resources, allowing students to progress at their own pace based on the mastery of competencies. Educational institutions have partitioned knowledge into subjects and teach them in silos, losing focus on the whole. Narrow educational programs take students on an excursion to well-paid parts of theories and ask the students to replicate only the solution. This tourist experience is not sufficient to gain mastery. Students should be encouraged to question, explore, challenge, debate, and rediscover knowledge for themselves rather than to memorize, accept, repeat what is taught. This will help them acquire skills that can be applied to any field. Creativity requires freedom to question established beliefs, prevailing theories, and conventional wisdom. Learning is often constrained by the authority of those who teach and by the social acceptance of what has already been discovered. At its heart of knowledge, it's a process of endless discovery for greater and greater knowledge rather than a set of orthodox truths that are to be passed on and accepted religiously. We need a shift from respect for authority to the respect for the individual. In the past few decades, early childhood education has transformed immensely. Earlier, young children were harshly punished and they were deprived of love in the name of discipline. Maria Montessori designed a system that respects the freedom and choice of the child. Her students gain self-discipline by internalizing values and through mutual respect. Glenn Dorman gave simple rules to enhance memory. Follow the interest of the child. Stop teaching before the child wants to stop. Do not test them. These few methods, when applied, sustain the innate natural curiosity of the child. They motivated them to develop interest and passion for subjects. So, all the principles that we are discussing in the conference, even when they are implemented in small measures, they will bring out immense difference in the way the children are treated. We talked about physical abuse or physical violence, but we have not eliminated the emotional stress that is being given to students right now. In primary and secondary level of school education, project-based learning has been widely used as a teaching method. It incorporates transdisciplinary approach, overcoming the silos of disciplines, but our obsession with measuring has made these approaches mechanistic. While assessment and evaluation measure progress and identify weak spots, they also stifle personal growth and they create a stressful environment. We are measuring quantifiable skills only. Creativity and genius cannot be measured, and we need to wait until they manifest as achievements in the life of the students. As discussed in the earlier panels, World Health Organization reports that students are more stressed than ever. Increased workloads and social media use could be contributing to the fact that the number of students dying by suicide has almost doubled in just over a decade. The well-being of the student must be at the heart of education. We need to learn how to live happily and harmoniously as an individual and as responsible contributor to the progress of society. I work as a math coach at the primary and secondary level of a school. So the questions that we often hear from students are, why are we learning this? Is it really necessary that I learn how to solve quadratic equation and how to calculate square root when I can easily use a calculator? Is it really necessary that I have to draw the graph by hand? Because there are so many tools that are available easily. So we are incorporating many hands-on experiences and bringing out change in which math education has been followed for several years. Teaching formula and procedures is replaced by activities and discussions that develop number sense. Number sense is a way of relating numbers concretely and visually so that the abstract notion of numbers becomes real to the student. Pluralistic way of teaching, offering a choice to the student, validating the thinking process and not just the result, they have all brought major difference in the attitude of the learner. Unless students see the purpose of learning and its real-world implication, they will not be an active learner. We have also observed that skipping new teaching models in any leg of school education does not bring any positive result at all. So if we don't teach these new methods in kindergarten level, we cannot expect the same result at the primary level. If we skip them and we teach only these integrated methods in secondary school level, we cannot expect the same levels. We have to implement all the tools at each level. Stanford University established purposeful learning in 2014. Students declared mission, not a major, like I am learning human biology to eliminate human hunger. I'm learning computer science and political science to rebuild how citizens engage with governments. This purposeful learning was implemented to couple disciplinary pursuit with the purpose that fueled it. Alumni of this type of teaching method reported that their missions have become a compass that guided their career. They have an endless list of contributions to eliminate poverty, bring better welfare, etc. And this kind of clarity of purpose, experience creating impact along with mastery of subject matter has been a key to their success. I'd like to conclude that by saying education must develop independent mind capable of making conscious value judgments and act on deeper convictions. Thank you.
Thank you. David Skalmani, yes? Thank you, Vani, to bringing out those pieces around student agency and competencies and active learning. I think we're going to see that thread come through here as we hear from our other presenters today.
So thank you, Lisa. I'm Davide Scalmani. I am the director of the Italian Cultural Institute in Cairo, Egypt. I cover the same position here in Belgrade, so I'm back to where I've been at least until 2 months ago. But in my previous capacity, I was a lecturer of Italian language sent by the Italian government through different places in the world. So I had the opportunity to be involved in different national education systems in South Korea, Mexico, and so forth. And I've seen the space of the student-centered approach growing in those 20 years. But some conditions have to be met. And I speak first about responsibilities, a double responsibility. Successful student-centered approach is based on the fact the student is responsible for learning. He cannot shift the responsibility to someone else. He is responsible. That is the deep meaning of being centered on student. But at the same time, the teacher is responsible for facilitating the learning. So without those two responsibilities, I don't think we can go on with the student-centered approach. And of course, the knowledge transmission paradigm is replaced by the competence, as Lisa said, learning paradigm, founded on cooperative learning and inductive methods. We have discussed them above. They include a wide range of active methodologies, inquiry-based learning, case-based instruction, problem-based learning, and so forth. But they are basically derived from the theories of pragmatic pedagogy. And I would add the humanistic approach. The professor before from the Faculty of Arts, she advocated for the presence of artists here in the panel. And I totally agree. I would add another suggestion for the next conference. Ask to a historian of pedagogy to be here and a philosophy of education to be here. They have so many insights in what we have been talking about. And we've been talking about the Leonardo case, and we said, well, it's not about creativity. So what it's all about? If it's not creativity, because creativity is 24 hours, 7, we are all creative. Maybe we don't know, and we have to study more about the school that Leonardo attended. Do you know which school attended Leonardo? It's the same school that was attended by Sandro Botticelli, Pietro Perugino, Domenico Ghirlandaio, Luca Signorelli. I mentioned, I think, 4 or 5 of the best artists, scientist artists, because that distinction was not clear at that time, of course. They all have been schooled by one master, Andrea del Verrocchio. So it has something to do with school, even for a genius, as we are usually defining those personality, which doesn't define anything. If we say that someone is a genius, we just give a patent to them, but there's no explanation of it. So history of pedagogy teaches us a lot of things. In the Italian tradition we had in 21st century, Maria Montessori, up to Loris Malaguzzi, very much focused on the primary education, even kindergarten and so forth. But we can mention, of course, the French tradition, Célestin Freinet and others. A basic assumption of all those pedagogists is that the learner's mind is embedded in an individual body, which is actually a person, and was mentioned before by Professor Zucconi, the importance of the person-centered education. And persons, of course, are in relation with the social dimensions, so parents, family, socialization issues, peer group, all those things that usually stay out of the classroom. And persons have several levels of needs, basic needs, more developed needs, and I have seen the presentation before mentioning human flourishing. And that's a need too, we have to take into account that. So that's the level of the intervention that the student-centered approach should reach. Student-centered education empowers the students to take ownership of what they learn by focusing on how the new knowledge solves the problems solves problems or adds value. Instead of simply trying to hammer information into the child's mind and asking illegitimate questions, the teacher, as facilitator, presents the student with an issue and guides the class as they build a solution. Illegitimate questions, that's a definition that I got from Heinz von Förster. Was a scientist, cybernetics. He founded the second order cybernetics. And I think illegitimate questions, maybe the definition is very simple, are questions of which we already know the answer. So probably 99% of the questions that have been raised in a normal classroom are illegitimate questions. And why are they illegitimate? Because they trivialize human beings. It's such a trivial thing for me to ask a question to a pupil, to a student, of which I already know the answer. It's totally demotivating. We are asking to transform a human being into an input-output machine. No motivation in that. I don't find, and even more now, we have an extended knowledge base, very accessible. Why would we ask question whose answer we already know? Then that's a student-centered approach. Ask only legitimate questions. Questions that we don't know exactly the answer. Big questions, we have seen that before, the SDGs goals. They are all questions we don't know the answer exactly, but we can build knowledge using our resources, using our minds, using the person that the classroom are made of. And I'm speaking now about Italian system, which is in the last 20 years being influenced by the European Union recommendation, which have been focused on the competencies. And competencies, I think it's a good compromise, given the fact that the system, we have national systems, of course, and we have to harmonize the system in the European Union. But the thing is, if we don't find a way to communicate, to transfer the knowledge from one system to the other, it's going to be very complicated to go on at the European level. So competencies are actually a clever way to overcome the problem of non-transferable knowledge. And we have also competencies as the end of process of education based on, of course, knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So the three levels that compose the education action as the European Union have seen it. One problem, Italian problem. The decision makers level is very well aware of the necessity to shift to the competencies based education. The teachers are not so happy to accept the new model, and just I've found a way, very clever way, to walk around the suggestion, the recommendation of the European Union and the national authorities. What have they done? They have stick to their disciplinary subject, and they have just rewritten it in a competence-based formula, so that they can teach as they are used to be, but they can show to the headmaster or to the supervisor that they have just they have adjusted to what was asked to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I remember as a faculty member myself, as a professor, my students were very unhappy when I asked them a question and I said, I don't know. And so I think there's a shift that has to happen, not only of the student taking responsibility for their learning, but it's among the professor or teacher as well to admit that And that's a shift, that's another shift, because you also don't want your dean saying, well, that professor doesn't know what they're talking about, right? So there is a whole kind of social, context that needs to be shifted as well. Thank you so much. Pericles, Mitkas?
Hello, everybody. I am a professor of computer engineering at Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. I was, up until August, the rector of the university, and now I'm on sabbatical at the University of Pennsylvania in the US. I'm also the president of the Black Sea University Network, network of about 115 universities, including the University of Belgrade, in 12 countries around the Black Sea region. So with that background, I have some experience to talk about the subject, but Lisa Petrides made me realize that my perspective is limited to higher education, and that this is true. So towards a student-centered education, towards a student-centered higher education, I should correct myself. So the audience in higher education are the Millenials, a generation born around the beginning of the century. And they have distinct characteristics because this is the first generation that was born in the digital world. They are ethnically and racially diverse because people move around much more often. They are more progressive, the most tech advanced generation ever. They not only use technology, but they're willing, and they are doing it, they're willing to advance it as well. They believe education through technology is a big factor to achieving success in life. And this is true for the majority of young people today, which see themselves as global citizens eager to contribute to the welfare of society and the world, and they take on social issues, and they take a stand. They learn foreign languages, they interact, they travel much easier, much on a moment's notice, and this is especially true for areas like the European Union and the US. So all these characteristics make them want flexibility in their education as well. They believe that the answer and the path to success is education, so we have to deliver. A few years back, actually 5 years back, I was attending one of those mega conferences in Brussels on innovation, innovation convention, thousands of people in sessions, and there was, of course, one session on innovation on education. Opened by Chris Patton of Barnes, the Chancellor of Oxford University, with a huge experience in other positions too. He defended the large educational institutions like his university. Back then, MOOCs were a trendy thing, so he specifically said universities will not be MOOCed down. We have nothing to fear if we continue to provide quality education. Interestingly enough, the next speaker to him was Anne-Marie Maffidon. Then I believe she was about 20 years old. She had just received a master's in mathematics, the youngest female student at her 19th years of age to receive such a degree, a genius. So she said, we want to be able to learn anything, anytime, anywhere, at our pace, at our place. And of course, this strategy will work for geniuses. The average student may need a more structured program of study, some guidance, but it is true that students come better prepared, better educated to college. And they have the ability to learn from many different sources outside or besides in parallel to class. Technology makes all these modes of learning possible. So technology is good for education because it generates an environment where knowledge is accessible, ubiquitous, abundant, at our fingertip, coming on a display of a small or medium or large device. New devices, new tools, new platforms for learning everywhere. And of course, it comes with some risks, like we are more machine dependent for every piece of knowledge. We don't memorize anything anymore. We can know, kids or students can no longer remember the big dates of history or places of history, and we consider it a deficiency. Probably it's not. Many phases of education have been discussed in this conference and in other conferences on education. Distant learning, lifelong learning, e-learning, MOOCs, webinars, and they enable what I call the multiple windows to student-centered education, in which mobility, transferability of learning experiences, and virtual reality make this flexible lifelong learning a reality. I don't think I need to give definitions to flexible learning, but I get students, as I said, I teach in a 5-year combined bachelor's and master's diploma of engineering program that requires students to take about 60 classes. They're all science and engineering. And yet there are students who take an additional 10 MOOCs from places like Stanford or MIT to add on to their curriculum. I had a student who came to me last year with a topic. Students have to do a thesis, a diploma thesis in their final semester. So a student came to me with a subject for his thesis, which was so advanced that even after he finished it, I'm still not certain I understand the whole thing. He had gone to Montreal and worked with a machine learning research center, a famous machine learning research center, and he came back with all that knowledge. So students, especially in computer science, computer engineering, they may know more than what we know as teachers. And another example is the course that I have to teach next semester at UPenn. It's a machine learning for life sciences. I'm fascinated and terrified at the same time because it's a subject that will allow me to learn and teach new things that were discovered in the last 5 or 6 years, but I may have students who know more than I do in the class. What do I do? So all these, do they signal the end of traditional university as we know it? Not really, of course, but micromasters, nano degrees, one-off classes, specialization are all justifiable. Should we follow the others in the business rather than copying Stanford or MIT? We should ask, what does my institution do better than any other? Where do we have the expertise? And then focus on that and avoid a situation where local universities will simply become educational service providers for other countries. This is certainly the case in Greece, where we see a lot of our graduates leave out of the country. This is certainly the case for Serbia and other countries in the world. Several concepts will shape the future of education during the next 20 years, but they all can be summed up to flexibility. And these are 10 characteristics of student-centered experiences. Rather than analyzing all of them, I will repeat, going from upper left corner counterclockwise. Anytime, anywhere, feedback from my partners in learning, students can get that. All of my artifacts as a student are archived in shared multimedia records, open education records, like Lisa Petrides said. All of the world's thinkers are connected to me, and I can gain from their collective knowledge, and all of the world's knowledge is at my fingertips. I will part you with two disturbing thoughts. Brain-machine interface. It will be a major disruptor to education, especially higher education. There is progress in all fronts. We don't know how this is going to evolve, and we don't know how the brain will be able to download some information and knowledge from the machine, from the computer. And the second disturbing thought is we in this conference and similar conferences, we can all talk the talk, we can all analyze the situation. I doubt if any one of us, and with the exception of those who are younger, below 40, 45 years of age, I doubt if any one of us can walk the walk. I doubt if any one of us can imagine a class without a teacher. Nobody can take ourselves out of the picture. But that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pericles. And I just, the idea that we can be skilled facilitators and actually help a student learn any subject, I think is something, Vanya, you certainly said as well. If the teacher now becomes facilitator, knowing everything more than your students know isn't actually the goal. It's how do you facilitate that student learning. So,
no, I know, but
sorry,
you still have to be in the class.
Absolutely, yes.
In the classroom.
So last, Jovan Despotović from Serbia here. Thank you.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, I am very much satisfied having you in Belgrade because we need all kinds of pushing for the best future or the better future because of the history that you know. At first place, we have to recollect our position that strategic planning for the education of the future is the major point that I would like to emphasize. Because in ex-socialistic states or republics, we lost a lot of planning skills, planning abilities, and we are trying to catch the pace and catch the goals that all of the other developed countries already did. So, this is my major concern. In regard to education and within the strategy of the nation, this can be a most important place for education. A realistic national strategy should be based on knowledge from all levels in the country, and also in the wider society, like Europe or the world. And also UNESCO offers a numerous experience and case studies for many of the questions that we have, including education. Major directions in future education should be based in that way that improvement of both physical and mental health of the society and each of us will be above all. I would also like to remind you that healthy people, a healthy society, and a healthy culture in clear environment, which I will repeat several times today, could come in very traditional and modern education basis. Also, there are a lot of challenges from the cyber world. I don't want to list any of those, but there are so a lot of threats altogether. Networking is one of the possible solutions for development of education in poor and not developed countries. That's my major concern since I've been representing half of the world in UNESCO, International Hydrological Committee, for 4 years, and I've been visiting from Mexico and Canada all the way to Central Asia and ex-Soviet republics. And I found that their education, their basic education, is not that bad. But they are trying to jump over the wide and deep gap, which was for decades in those areas, which means half or maybe more than half of the world need some dramatic changes of education, which all of us would be very much happy to see. So not only the developed world, but also the developing world should be having in mind all of this stuff. In addition to that, modern solutions in society, and above all the environment, I told you that I would be repeating this stuff, should be individually tailored. River by river, lake by lake, location by location, and this is the way that we can attract young people, solving the problems in environment and societies. So it makes even more complicated and difficult our position as educators and scholars. In this regard, must repeat, poor and developing countries, we must find people, predominantly students, and even pupils, who are ready to serve the national strategy, not only of IT sector or business sector, but also environment sector and education sector. Those should be elite. Those should be privileged people in the way that they are going to try to pursue professions in this regard. Otherwise, decreasing the position of educators, teachers, scholars, professors, all together will lead to a much poorer society altogether. This is my major concern of this presentation and this topic at all. So, the best students and champions in any of the fields of human activities should be chosen, supported by all means, financially, in any other way, in all of the parts of the world that I mentioned, not to repeat. In that way, we can rally on them in the next future, in the future education and development and all. Last but not the least, I would like to remind you that if people do not change and adapt to nature, the nature will respond in much more dramatic ways. In this moment, I will connect what was discussed about the art and the science and education, and just remind you that Hokusai, famous painter from Japan, had painted a big wave. It's a very famous his painter. Couple of decades before the big wave that had happened in Phuket and in Fukushima. So there is a very tiny line, if there is any, between anticipation, our forecasting using mathematics and all kinds of probability theory, and art. So this is one point. The other point is that the only people, group of people that saved their lives in Phuket was the group of tourists from a hotel where a small girl was annoying and screaming at those people who were very much eager to see where the sea disappeared, running toward the hill. So knowledge, and knowledge is the only thing that we can rely on in the future. Last but not the least, I think that, again, I think that major demanding positions for employing of people will be the three categories of people or domains that we are not facing with enough caution. Small children are very much jeopardized by new technologies. Very old people, we don't have concept for the very old people, and again, environment. Thank you very much.